Okay, so welcome to Brown Bag History for October 11th, 2023. We're talking about Manning's restaurant today. And as we start, we acknowledge that the land around Revelstoke and on the Columbia River and its tributaries is the Snacks homeland and traditional territory. We acknowledge the ties of the Secwepemc, the Okanagan Nation Alliance, and the Ktunaxa to this land. We acknowledge our use and inhabitation of this land sacred to these four nations. We respectfully honor their traditions and culture. So Manning's was started by Horace Manning, and he was born August 27th, 1870 in London, England. Came to Coldwater, Ontario at the age of 13 with his family. He married Alice Josephine Galbraith in 1892. And then in the late 1890s, he came to BC, planning on settling in Rossland and pursuing mining interests. But he stopped in Revelstoke to see his brother Fred Manning, who is involved with the Robinson Lumber Company sawmill. And he ended up working in the mill and decided to settle in Revelstoke. In 1900, he built his Palace of Sweets, or Candy Palace, in the 100 block of Mackenzie Avenue with living quarters above. That would have been probably close to or around where the parking lot is now, next to the Avalanche Center in Grizzly Plaza. That whole section of that block burned down in 1914. But that is where his palace was located. And you can see just a little bit of the sign there and his little board. And right on the corner was Hobson's Bakery. So it was right on that first block of Mackenzie. That's where he started making his famous Broadway chocolates. And in an interview we have with Avery Gunterman, from Beaton, Avery talked about his grandparents, William and Mattie Gunterman. Mattie Gunterman was famous for photography that she did in the area, but William and Mattie and their son Henry were living in Seattle, and William had actually worked for a Seattle confectionery company called Henry and Taylor, and was a candy maker. In 1898, they walked from Seattle to Beaton with their horse and their dog and their 8-year-old son Henry, and settled in Beaton. And according to Avery, it was William Gunterman that taught Horus Manning how to make chocolates, and the Broadway chocolates recipe was his recipe. So that's the only place that I've heard that story. So it's not confirmed through other sources. But according to the family story, it was Mr. Gunterman that taught Horus Manning how to make what became the famous Broadway chocolates. In Beaton, every Christmas, William Gunterman made candy for all the children of Beaton. So he was quite a popular man. This was the interior of his original store in 1910. The man, don't know the woman behind the counter, but the man was Jack Probin, who later started his own little business, candy business for a while as well. So he went into competition with his original employer. According to the newspaper, Manning started his candy store about 1900. And in 1903, it was mentioned that he'd put in an up-to-date peanut roaster. So the machine is of the latest pattern. It is operated by gasoline. It does its work well, and fresh roasted peanuts can now be had daily at Mr. Manning's store. In September of 1905, they purchased the 108 4th Street East, and that was known as the Manning family home for many years. It had been built a few years previous to that. They were the second owner of that home. Yeah. A lot of locals would know it as a streeter house. So in 1912, he arranged to have a new building built, and that's where Manning's is now. But as I mentioned, that was his second building. He had already been in operation in the town for about 12 years previous to that. So there was a big write-up in the newspaper on August 4th, 1912, with his plans for the new Mannings and the candy factory. And he'd ordered the contract to Foot and Pratolini, and Foot and Pratolini were kind of legendary builders in town. They were the main contractors on the courthouse. They also built the building that was C.R. McDonald's drugstore, now Taco Club, and Guy Barber's jewelry store, which is the fine line paddle store now. So they were both really skilled builders. Individually, they had been working in the town for over a decade at that time. William Foote had started building houses here on sort of 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th Street. And what he'd do is he'd buy up several properties and build houses on them and then sell them with the houses on. And he used sort of similar house designs in certain blocks. So if you go on 5th Street, you can see 3 or 4 houses all in the same design, same with 6th Street. So it was quite noticeable building styles that he used. Pratolini had come here from Italy in 1903 with several other Italian stonemasons from northern Italy, and they had been brought out by the CPR to build what's now where Loopbrook is now, the stone pillars that are there. That was their first job. He went into business for himself and started building buildings. He specialized in concrete block buildings, so he built what was known as the Porta House, the one just by the 4th Street roundabout, the little one that's angled there. He built that for the Porta family in the early 1900s. He built what was known locally for years as the Pink Castle. It's no longer pink, but the big turreted house on 2nd Street. That was his family home and boarding house for a lot of the other Italians who lived in town. If you're walking by there, people notice the house, which is quite spectacular. But have a look at the fence around it too. The fence is concrete, and it's got like little triangles through it, and it's quite an amazing piece of work. It doesn't get noticed as much because it's just a fence, but it's really unique in town. But anyway, those were the 2 builders that built Manning's. So obviously very skilled builders. It was the contract was for a 2-story cement and pressed brick block at a cost of over $10,000. And the building was to be 20 by 100 feet with a metal roof and an 18 by 20 foot basement. The ground floor was occupied by the store with a beam ceiling, paneled walls and ceiling. And at the rear of the store, there was a ladies' waiting room, lavatories, and office. They also had a freezing room with a cement floor and an ice house in the basement connecting with an entrance at the rear of the block. The outer walls were of 20-inch solid cement, the front being pressed brick. The candy factory was in the basement, and unfortunately, we don't have any photographs of the candy factory. The 2nd story was offices and rooms. And the newspaper said, when completed and equipped, this will be the most modern and best candy factory between Calgary and Vancouver. The newspaper also said, Mr. Manning has been in the candy business for many years, and he'd been looking for a suitable site for his factory and was looking outside of Revelstoke. He'd gone to Medicine Hat, where he'd actually purchased property. And it said recently he was offered substantial inducements to locate his factory at the coast, or at Vancouver. But after a careful study of the entire field, he decided to stay with Revelstoke and locate the factory there. So Manning was really involved in the community. He was on city council the year after incorporation as an alderman. He was involved as an alderman in the sale of the Revelstoke Water, Light and Power Company to the city in 1902. He was on council off and on into the early 1930s. He was also on the chairman of the school board for 25 years. And in 1927, he was president of the BC School Trustees Association. So as a school trustee, he was involved in the construction of the central school in 1902. That's the school that was located on the what was the playing field of the old Mountain View School property, where the old school restaurant is now. He pushed for construction of Selkirk School on 6th Street and convinced the provincial government to fully fund the construction. That was a controversial decision. There was a lot of people that wanted the new school to be built closer to Central School. They wanted them like just in the same place. But and they were saying that if they built it on 6th Street, it was on the outskirts of town. So in 1909, when they were discussing that, it was on the outskirts of town. But he said the town is expanding. This will be this prime residential area, and we will need a school there. And he was right. And that was Selkirk School was opened in 1911 and torn down in 1983. He was president of the Board of Trade, what's now the Chamber of Commerce, on several occasions. He pushed for the construction of the Big Bend Highway and was chairman of the Highway Committee, meeting with the provincial government on numerous occasions to discuss the Big Bend Highway. He was one of 2 delegates who met with the Minister of Public Works, Thomas Taylor, MLA, to request that a highway be built to the summit of Mount Revelstoke. That was in 1912, before it was a national park. And they did get a commitment from the province to build that road. But then once it became a national park, that was taken over by the Dominion government. So at that time, Manning's was one of the leading businesses in town. This is their ad from 1913. Pure food candy in a cleanly store. Encourage local industry by purchasing candy made in your city. Buy your Christmas candy from us. Our homemade at 50 cents and $1 are extra Christmas values at Manning's wholesale and retail. And a lot of teenagers, their first jobs are at McDonald's and A&W and Tim Hortons. Back then, a lot of first jobs for kids was at Manning's, either selling ice cream and candies or working in the candy factory, boxing chocolates. So it was a lot of young people worked there. Helen Grace, who's in her 90s now, remembers working at Manning's as a teenager. And she said at one time she could rattle off all 16 flavors of their ice cream sundaes. She said that Mr. Manning allowed his employees to eat as much chocolate as they wanted. And she said usually after a couple of days, no one had any desire to eat anymore. So during the war, the Manning's Broadway chocolates, which was their premier brand of boxed chocolates, became really popular. This is a note from 1945, and there was a local group called the Revelstoke Servicemen's Hostess Club, and they were said they were providing comforts for hospital trains, and mentions that 17 such trains have been met and 30 baskets were supplied the trains, each basket containing oranges, candy bars, and gum, fresh fruit in season, Coca-Cola, ginger ale, fancy biscuits, magazines, Manning Broadway's chocolate, nuts, and cigarettes. And it said each soldier returning from overseas received as a gift a box of Manning's Broadway chocolates whenever they are available. 109 boxes of these chocolates have been distributed to date. And it said they thank Mr. Manning and his staff for supplying chocolates at all times when they were required. And there was, I've seen notes in the newspaper where they were encouraging people to get their orders in for overseas delivery, or if they wanted to send their chocolates overseas. And a lot of people did that. They would send them to their relatives in England. It's known as a special treat. This was their Christmas ad in 1945. So in February of 1948, Horace Manning sold the company to Alderman H. Warren Cooper and Francis Fitzgerald Eyre, who's known as Jerry Eyre. And Mr. Manning died shortly after that sale, and he died in August of 1948. And so at that time, when he sold it to Cooper and Eyre, Jerry Eyre was Warren Cooper's son-in-law. Warren Cooper, his main business in town was the Roxy Theater, the Avonlea Theater at that time. He'd opened it in 1938, which is when it became a theater after being previously a hardware store. And Mr. Eyre at that time was a returned soldier, and he'd had a distinguished record in the Royal Canadian Air Force. So there's a picture from the 1940s showing Manning's. And we don't know what year the sign was painted, but it was an early sign. It was redone, I think I'd say in the 80s by David Williams, as when it was a Chinese restaurant, and it changed homemade chocolates to Chinese restaurant. But it's still the same style of printing. So it's a very recognizable sign. And you can see there's a little sign there that says Manning's Coffee Shop, because they would have light lunches and coffee there as well. So for many decades, Jack Pugsley was the candy maker there. He was born in Revelstoke on December 24th, 1901. The family name was originally a Pugliese. They were an Italian family. And unfortunately, I don't know which one of these children is Jack, but he is in the photograph. And they anglicized the name to Pugsley. He died in Kamloops in 1992 at the age of 90. And his obituary said he is well remembered and loved as the candy maker of the world famous Manning's Broadway chocolates. He'd moved to Logan Lake in 1991 to be close to family. He was never married, so he went to live with a sister and nephew, I believe. And unfortunately, I don't have any photographs of him other than this family photograph, and don't have lots of information. What I've heard from people is that he was just a lovely man. People really enjoyed him, but he was quiet, and we don't have a lot of information on him. So if anybody has any stories about Jack Pugsley, I'd love to hear them. We have quite a few artifacts. The Quang family, who later bought the business, have donated quite a few pieces from when it was a candy factory. It's a big copper pot that they used for making candies. Of course, the famous boxes. Everybody still remembers the blue boxes. Every now and then we'll get artifacts in, small artifacts, and they'll be in Manning's Broadway boxes. So I think there's probably still a lot of basements and attics in town that have the blue boxes. And they had some special boxes as well. This one is called a varsity package. So I'm assuming that's the one that they were buying that for your student at university. So that's sort of what I'd take from being a varsity package. And they had a few other designs as well of boxes, but most people remember the blue ones. And then, of course, we have a display of, we have quite a few of the candy molds in our collection. So we did everything from chickens to, we've got lots of different styles of rabbits. We've got Santa Clauses, all sorts of different Santas, Easter eggs. And just got a story from Velda today about how in 1952, she was gifted for Easter a 25-pound egg. It was filled with chocolates. and back in 1952. So, and it had her name on it as well. I'd love to see that picture. So, yeah, I think a lot of people still have stories about Mannings and about the chocolates.
Jack was always in the basement making chocolates.
Yeah, and yes. And as I say, I unfortunately don't have any pictures of the basement, the factory either. So in 1948, it was to say it was purchased by Cooper and Eyre, and they were running it as they continued the candy factory. They would have, it was a little coffee shop. They had light lunches there as well, and ice cream, and these were some of a couple of the menus from the time that Jerry Eyre was running it. And so you could get, sandwich there, and pies, and the Halloween marshmallow fudge sundae for 20 cents sounds pretty good. The place with the friendly atmosphere. And then they always say the folks at home would enjoy a box of Manning's Broadways. There's another one, a toasted chicken sandwich with coffee for 20 cents, a mocha ball with coffee for 10 cents, and apple pie, 10 cents a slice. So that was its reputation as a candy shop, ice cream parlor, light lunches. And then we've got lots of photographs of downtown where you can see Manning's and that famous building sign. And then in 1955, the business was purchased by John and Mary Kwong. John's not in this picture, but this is John's parents and a couple of his older siblings. This is man in the white shirt is Quang, and he came to Canada in 1899 and was a labor contractor for the CPR because he was fluent in both Cantonese and English. And he established a store and rooming house on First Street East to house his workers. In the block where the Rumpus Beer Company is, there were several. That was sort of the one of the Chinatowns in town. So he established a business there. He brought his wife Yvonne Quang to Canada in 1907, and this is Yvonne in the black dress. The two children here are Jean and Sam Quang, the two oldest children of the Quang family. We don't have, and we don't know the names of the other people, but they were probably extended family of the Quangs. So they came in 1907. They established their house on 5th Street East, right where the senior center is now. And they built a laundry there and were running a laundry. So this is a picture. This picture was taken right where the senior center is now. They had 10 children, 6 girls and 4 boys. One child, little girl Maisie, passed away at the age of 6. And Wong Quang died in 1932 at the age of 57, leaving his wife Yvonne with all the children between the ages of 5 and 22. And that was in the middle of the Great Depression. Mrs. Quang and the family continued to run the laundry. Even the youngest, who was Jim at the bottom there, was 5 years old. So everybody helped. An interview I did with Jim later, he said, Mother, through her strength, courage, and loving discipline, organized a family work unit that not only enabled the members to survive, but to go on to higher education and to become meaningful citizens. Incidentally, she was also able to pay off all of Father's debts with interests. An interesting thing about that 3 of the girls became nurses. The oldest daughter, Jean, graduated as a nurse in New Westminster in the 1930s. And she was the first Chinese Canadian to graduate as a nurse. She really could have broke a barrier for other Asian women at that time. The little boy here right beside Mrs. Kwong, that's John. So he is the one with his wife. He married, although John was born in Revelstoke in 1920, and he married Mary Mochizuki, and they had 3 children, Ron, Deborah, and Teresa. So he bought it in 1955, did some extensive renovations, and it reopened in July of 1956, or August of 1956. This is an article from July 19th, 1956, and it said, one of the oldest eating places in the interior has had a facelifting. Manning's, the substantial brick structure on Mackenzie Avenue, has been completely remodeled. It bears little resemblance to the familiar premises frequented by hundreds of Revelstokians in years past. The entrance was transformed into one of the most attractive storefronts in town. The whole interior was stripped, and all the old fixtures were removed. They said they had a suspended acoustical fiberglass ceiling. They imported British inlaid linoleum tile in the public areas, and said the kitchen had a grease-proof asphalt tile, which is both serviceable and attractive. They had ultra-modern booths. They were custom designed by Eaton's and produced in Vancouver by Cyril C. Birch, was a designer. So the booths were used for the first time in Canada in the Mannings, and it said it was setting a style trend soon to be noted in other first-class restaurants across the country. The chairs also impel immediate attention. They are of plastic reinforced with glass fibers. They are from the Herman Miller collection and were designed by Charles Eames. They were especially imported for Mannings from Venice, California, and Eames was a well-known designer of chairs. You know, if you look up Eames chairs, they're worth a lot of money. It said structural alterations and custom fixtures were produced by J.R. Bezanson Fixtures Vancouver for the T. Eaton Company. Design was executed by Frederick Fuller of the Eaton staff. I found that really interesting. I didn't know that that was an area that Eaton's did, that they were actually doing kind of interior design. They had designers and could do sort of the whole work process, manage that. I found that very interesting. Said N.M. Carter was responsible for the color styling and overall direction of the project, designed, planned, and executed by the T. Eaton Company Canada Limited. Long noted for its homey atmosphere as a place for light lunches and refreshments, Manning's will now graduate to the top of the scale as a full-fledged restaurant serving high-quality food, but still catering to its light lunch clientele. John Quang is the present owner. He has a wide experience in the restaurant business. It was noted that he was a director of the Revelstoke Rotary Club and was involved with the Williamson's Lake project that the Rotary Club looked after. There were also congratulatory ads from Palm Ice Cream, one of their suppliers, Hobart Food Machines, who supplied the dishwashers, and Buscombe and Company, which supplied the glassware and silverware. So it was quite an event when they renovated it. And fortunately, I don't have any pictures of the interior at the moment. I'm hoping to get some at some point. But it was certainly a fixture in town for a long time. So they actually had the opening in early August. The newspaper said Manning's reopened for business. Manning's new restaurant was open Saturday when the place was crowded all day by people admiring the modern facilities. John Quang was the recipient of many congratulations. Flowers from business associates were prominently displayed. And there's a menu probably shortly after they took it over. And you can see they've added a lot of food options at that time. They didn't initially have a Chinese menu. That they sort of introduced that gradually. They weren't sure that the public was really quite ready for that. So, but they did eventually add Chinese food to their menu. But all the time that they had it, they advertised that they had Chinese and Western cuisine on their menu. But this one is almost strictly Western cuisine. like hot chicken sandwiches and 3-decker toasted clubhouses, etc. And on the back of the menu, they were still doing the Manning's Broadway chocolates. So it says, among the outstanding attractions of British Columbia is the high quality of some of our handmade chocolates. And we, as makers and pioneers in this line, have had the honor and privilege of sending our goods to people throughout the world, purveying to members of the nobility, world-famous people, and a particular public. You may have no hesitation in presenting these chocolates to your most sincere friends with a feeling of pride that you have selected for them what is being presented to royalty. These chocolates are the results of 40 years' experience, and we trust that the goods will meet with your complete satisfaction. Manning's Candy Products. And when they say it was given to royalty, anytime there was any royal visitors passing through, they were given Manning's chocolates. Here's an ad from, now we're trying to find out, in the early 70s, the business was sold to a family named Pons, Chung, Shirley and Frank Pons. And this is an ad from 1971 where they're still said they're doing remodeling, and they were taking orders for Easter eggs and Broadway chocolates. The next ad that we can find in May, it's after they were redecorated, but there's no mention of the chocolates. So we're thinking that it was definitely when the Pons family took it over that they stopped. They closed down the candy factory. I think Mr. Pugsley was ready to retire at that point in any case, and they wanted to just focus on it being a Chinese restaurant. And so this is the closest I've been able to come to actually pinning down the date at this point of when the candy production stopped. And here's another ad from 1972. And so it was certainly running for a long time under different owners over the years. In 1960, John and Mary Kwong opened a second restaurant, the Chalet. It was in the former Club Cafe, right in between what's now the Royal Bank and the Roxy. And it was, so they opened it as the Chalet restaurant. And again, they were doing Western and Chinese menu there as well. Ron was one of the cooks there for many years. The first time I came to Revelstoke was in Labor Day of 1977. Came here, Ken and I were engaged at that point, and I came to meet his parents, who were living in Salmon Arm at the time, but they were up in Revelstoke for a golf tournament, and they said they would take us out for dinner. So we went to dinner at the Chalet. That was the first place I ever ate at in Revelstoke. So I have fond memories of the Chalet. I think a lot of people have fond memories of the Chalet. It was a lovely restaurant. There's a picture of the interior of the Chalet dining room. And this would be in the 60s. And there's Mary Kwong behind the counter in the restaurant. Here's a picture showing Manning's in probably the 1980s or so. And this was a good way for me to sneak in a picture of the outhouse raises, which locals know all about. More recent people who come to Revelstoke have never heard of outhouse raises, and they can't believe that we used to have outhouse races on Mackenzie Avenue. But it was a big thing here for a long time. But there you can see Manning's restaurant with their sign there. I found an interesting ad from 1962. It was noticed to the public. Contrary to the rumor that has circulated around town, Manning's restaurant was not closed by the health inspector, but for the purposes of redecorating, as previously announced. This may be confirmed by your health officer. Manning's Restaurant, John Quang, proprietor. Ron worked in the restaurant along with his sisters, He was attending a culinary school in Nanaimo, but he had to come home when John was injured after falling off a ladder. Ron said he was in his late teens at the time, but his father, so Ron was doing the cooking, but he said his dad wanted to test his food. So he was bringing soups and things to the hospital, which was where Save on Foods is now, for his dad to check the quality of the food. Said that they also hosted annual Christmas parties for all their business associates. So John Quang died in April 15th, 1974 of cancer. I was still just in his 50s, so quite young at the time. Mary died April 28th, 2017. A lot of people knew and loved Mary. She was a lovely person. And this is a picture of Manning's taken during the shutdowns in March 2020 during the outbreak of COVID. And what I didn't realize when I planned this talk and didn't really know until this week is that Manning's is closed and the building is being sold. So it looks like this talk is actually saying goodbye to Manning's in the community. And I hadn't realized that that was what was happening. But it looks like this is the end of Manning's. One more note is that in 1999, during Revelstoke Centennial, Ronnie Quang decided to have to recreate Manning's Broadway chocolates. He had the recipe. He'd been trained by Jack Pugsley, but he said having a recipe and being able to recreate it in the same way is not exactly the same. And I certainly know that, trying to recreate some of my mother's recipes. But he did produce some Manning's Broadway chocolates, and was able to get boxes made that were the same as the old blue boxes. And when he went into the box company in Vancouver, there was a Mr. Simoto there, and he said, "I know who you are," and because it was their company that had made the original Manning's boxes. And it turns out that the Simoto family had actually lived in Revelstoke during World War II. They were uprooted to another community and then ended up in Revelstoke for a while because they wanted to be closer to relatives who were in the New Denver camp. So it sort of came full circle, and another Revelstoke connection. So if anybody else has Manning stories and photographs, I'd certainly like to hear them. And so thanks for coming today. I'm going to, we'll get this up on our channel as soon as we can afterwards. So thank you very much. Hang on. I'm just going to stop recording here.